When we last discussed Islam, Muhammad had just created this religion, and it was beginning to take flight throughout the Arabian Peninsula. In this lesson, we're going to learn about how the subsequent, or the next leaders, continued to spread Islam after Muhammad's death, and the role they played in both the spreading of Islam and the founding of an empire. A couple of words and concepts we want to look out for. Caliph and rightly guided caliph are some vocabulary words to pay attention to, and you want to walk away from this lesson knowing the names of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and the Umayyad family. Before Muhammad had died and after the founding of Islam, he had spread this religion all throughout the Arabian Peninsula, and in doing so created a political empire in addition to a religious one. He did so by uniting Bedouin tribes and by bringing order and justice and this idea of salvation or the hope of heaven to the people of Arabia. We remember back that the Arabian Peninsula before Islam was essentially the American Wild West, with banditry and blood feuds being very common. However, in 632, Muhammad will die of a fever. Back then, there's really no way to help a fever go away, and they can be quite lethal when untreated. He died and then was buried in the city now named Medina, was once Yathrib. And this put the Muslim community at an issue in that they were left without a leader. And as you'll see as we study this year, when strong political entities or things are left without leaders, it often throws them into chaos, and this was a similar scenario. Muhammad had not named a successor, nor had he had an heir as a son, and nor had he told anyone how to pick a leader. And this really created a lot of panic. Some clans abandoned Islam. People refused to pay taxes, believing the government was weak. And some people even came forward and said that they themselves were the prophets that Muhammad had once been. The four people that would rule the Muslim empire and guide Islam after Muhammad's death were called the rightly guided caliphs. They were called so because all parts of Islam recognized them as the rightful guides of Islam. Their names were Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. Each one of them had known Muhammad personally and had had some role in Islam's birth or its spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula. They ruled under Muhammad's example, and they used Islam to guide all of their decisions. The kind of government that they would use would be called a caliphate, which is a kind of government style wherein the ruler is a caliph, or a religious leader of the Islamic faith. They were called the rightly guided caliphs because they continued to expand Islam a great deal, and they were recognized as legitimate by most Muslims. We're going to take a closer look at the four rightly guided caliphs here. You're going to notice that picture. We have Muhammad. Of course, he's the one wherein his face is not seen, nor his hands. The four rightly guided caliphs are those to the bottom. The first to come was Abu Bakr, who ruled from 632 to 634. He was elected by the Muslim community. He was Muhammad's closest companion and advisor, and he became the first caliph. Caliph means successor to Muhammad. He ruled until 634, until his death, and he would use military force to reunite this community that had broken up before he came to power. After that came Umar, who ruled from Abu Bakr's death in 634 to 644 CE. He was the second rightly guided caliph. He took territory from both the Byzantine and Persian empires. These once mighty empires were beginning to fall in the face of the new Muslim forces. He was one who instituted institutions such as a police force and a treasury to help keep order within the empire. After Umar became Uthman. He was the third rightly guided caliph. He was a very close companion to Muhammad, and he was actually one of the first to convert to this new religion, Islam. He was with Muhammad when he conquered Mecca, and it was under Uthman that the Quran was first compiled. These words that in the Islamic faith are the words of God. His election was very controversial. Some people believed it should have been Ali having been related to the Prophet Muhammad. He would later be assassinated by a mob of rebels. The last of the rightly guided caliphs was Ali, ruling from 656 to 661. He was the fourth rightly guided caliph. He was Muhammad's son-in-law. He was the first male to convert to Islam. And underneath him raged the first fitna, which is Arabic for civil war. He's assassinated in 661, ending the Rashidun Caliphate. The Rashidun Caliphate was the four rightly guided caliphs, and then his assassination will end it here in 661. Under each of the Rashidun, or rightly guided caliphs, the Muslim empire would expand, quadrupling in the 29 years after Muhammad's death. We'll take a quick look at the expansion of each one. First, Abu Bakr. He took it, really conquered all of the Arabian Peninsula. Remember, his job was basically reuniting all of the Muslims that had begun to go away from Islam and Muhammad's empire. Then came Umar, who expanded into what is now modern-day Iran, taking parts of the Persian Empire, into modern-day Turkey, taking parts of the Byzantine Empire, and going into North Africa, what would be today Egypt and Libya. After Umar came Uthman, who expanded even further each of these boundaries, taking the Cyprus, going up into the Caucasus Mountains, going to what is today Afghanistan and Pakistan, expanding even more so into North Africa. Under Ali, you're going to notice the map changes quite a bit, and this is because during the Fitna, the civil war, territory is lost overall. The light green are those who follow another person called Muawiyah, which we'll learn about in just a moment, and the dark green is those lands controlled under Ali. The reasons why they were so successful had to do with being energized by their faith. They went out to fight for their religion. This, throughout history, has proved a great motivation for soldiers, and they were great soldiers at that. They were fantastic fighters, especially in the kinds of environments they would fight in. The Byzantine and Persian empires had both been weakened by years of fighting between the two. If you remember that map, they were butted right up against each other and had been fighting one another. These areas proved easy conquests for another third invading empire, the Muslim Empire. The Muslims also had a lot of success because when they conquered an area that had Christians and Jews in it, they let them keep their faith and gave them often more rights than other people. All monotheists were treated very fairly under the Muslim Empire. As cultures are brought into the Muslim Empire, a lot of people do end up converting to Islam. Islam sets out to treat people equally and to offer them this idea of salvation, or basically heaven after their death. Additionally, if you were Muslim, you would receive tax breaks under the empire, which would further incentivize or make people want to convert to Islam. In the last part of this, we talked about how the final Rashidun, or rightly guided caliph, was a bit contested, or rather the last two, Uthman and Ali. This issue would become a major split between the two, or between what would then become two different sects of Islam, Shia Islam and Sunni Islam. Ultimately, it comes back to this idea that Muhammad never left a successor, and he did not have a son to succeed him, nor did he tell anyone or set up a plan for his succession. And when he died, there was contention, or there was disagreement over who should lead the Muslim community. So to back up a little bit, we want to talk about Uthman again, Uthman being the third Rashidun, or rightly guided caliph. In 644, he is elected caliph. It was very controversial because many people wanted Ali to rule instead, as he had been related to Muhammad. Remember, he was his son-in-law. There was a group of people who believed that the caliph, or successor to Muhammad, should exclusively be someone from the family of Muhammad. And Uthman really didn't do a good job of winning any favors over people who had not liked him in the first place. While he did further expand the empire, even more so than Umar did, into the north and the east, he also installed his cousin as the governor of Egypt, whose first act was to raise taxes, and he built himself a massive palace in Medina. This gave people the impression that he was about profit and not Islam. In 656, a group of people who did not support Uthman set out from Egypt to Medina. They had what they were going to do was they were going to unseat Uthman. They laid siege to his house. They literally surrounded his house and attacked it. And eventually, the mob breaks in and storms in, and they kill him in his bedroom. This begins to incite a split. We know beforehand there was two basically sides. There was Ali versus Uthman. When Uthman was killed, Ali would eventually take power. But there were a lot of people who disagreed with that. And basically it came down to two different people, whether Ali was going to take power or whether Muawiyah was going to take power, who was Uthman's cousin. So again, Ali is Muhammad's son-in-law. Those that supported him believed that the Caliph, or the successor to Muhammad, the person to lead the Islamic community, should be a relative of the Prophet. He had been considered for the power position of Caliph for some time. Actually, every time the election came to him, he was one of the people that people considered. He was opposed by many rulers for Uthman's cousin Muawiyah. He would spend 5 years of his reign fighting an internal war, fighting the first fitna, civil war. In 661, we're jumping ahead a bit here, he'd be struck down at prayer. He'd be struck down with a poisoned sword, and for the 3 days while he lay dying, he had his assassin protected and fed. Muawiyah was the other person to consider for the fifth caliph, or fourth or fifth caliph. He was Uthman's cousin. Muawiyah was part of the powerful Umayyad family, and that is a name you are going to want to remember. The Umayyad family had originally been part of the Quraysh family, who had first opposed Muhammad and forced him out of Mecca, but eventually they would come around and join Islam. Muawiyah's supporters believed that it was wrong for the leadership of the Muslim community to stay solely with Muhammad's family, especially since he did not have any children of his own that could take over the role. They believed that the leader of the Islamic community should be elected, and they should be chosen. The people who would follow Muawiyah, the people who believe in the choice of Caliph, would be called Sunnis, or Sunni Muslims. So jumping back a little bit, talking about the first fitna, the first civil war that was fought in the Islamic Empire, after Uthman's death, that is when this begins. Basically, there were different groups of Islam. One group believed that the Caliph should be chosen by the Muslim community. These people would eventually become Sunni Muslims. They backed Muawiyah. And the opposing belief that the Caliph, the selected Caliph should be hereditary, or the person who becomes Caliph should have been related to the previous Caliph and ultimately to Muhammad. These people would be called Shia Muslims. Ali was appointed the next Caliph, but not everyone really accepted that. Here's a bit more of a detailed map like the one we saw before about Ali's rule in the first fitna. The green area is that area controlled by Ali, that's Ali's caliphate, and the area in red is that supports Muawiyah. Of course, the modern borders you see won't exist yet. That blue, by the way, is another segment that broke off, which will become very important later on when we discuss the Umayyads. Aisha was one of the people that supported Muawiyah, or that supported the idea that the Caliph needs to be picked by the community. Aisha and her army and Ali and his army once met in order to show each other their strength, and actually neither had intended to fight, but eventually war breaks out between them, which leads Ali to a decisive victory against Aisha, one of Muhammad's former wives. The civil war is ultimately ended when Ali is assassinated. Again, he is praying at mosque when his assassin approaches him. He's a separatist. He wants to break away, and he stabs him with a poison-soaked sword. It takes Ali 3 days to die from the poison. The Umayyad family after Ali's death, who are already powerful and use that power, take control of the caliphate. Interestingly enough, for those that believe that the Caliph, the next Caliph, need not be related to Muhammad, they do impose a hereditary successor for their caliphate, meaning that each new caliphate had to be part of the Umayyad family. Again, these people would also be known as the Sunni Muslims. So just to break down how Sunni and Shia Muslims are different, ultimately this is what it comes down to. First, let's talk about the Umayyads. After Ali dies, the Umayyad family takes power and establish a dynasty. They move their capital from Medina to Damascus. They abandon the simple life of prophets and really go in for the profit with an FIT and make a lot of money. They wanted peace, or rather most Muslims wanted peace, so they accepted Umayyad rule. The Sunnis believe in electing caliphates, and this is despite this new hereditary dynasty. Shia Muslims, on the other hand, believe that the caliphs must have been descended from Muhammad himself. They do not accept Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman as have being real caliphs. And they also thought that Muawiyah and his followers were more interested in power than Islam. They would become known as Shia Ali, which means Party of Ali, or Shiites for short. At the end of the day, there are simply more Sunni Muslims than Shia. Shias make up about 10% of the Muslim community, and it's mostly dominated by the Sunni Muslims. And that concludes our presentation.